Hi, I'm Warrick from Harder and Steenbeck, and this week we're going to be having a chat. I've made myself a coffee, and the topic is why you should think of yourself as an artist, and you shouldn't limit yourself with perceptions about your own ability or what you think you can and can't do. So we're going to start out by considering a quote from the great artist Vincent van Gogh, who said, "If you hear a voice within you say, you cannot paint, then by all means paint, and that voice will be silenced." Now, to me, that's really profound, and it really means a lot, because with all of the comments that I get back from all of you on our various communities, the one thing I do tend to notice is people do tend to be quite down on themselves. You know, they tend to say, I won't attempt this, I'll only do that. Oh gosh, that looks a bit too advanced for me. I only do this with my airbrush, I only do that with my airbrush. And I always think to myself, I remember all of the times when I tried something for the first time, and oftentimes it went a little bit better than what I expected. And so I'd like to encourage you to consider lots and lots of quotes that I'm going to throw at you today. So just stay with me on this. Put it on while you're doing some painting of your own so that you're not in a rush to get away from me rambling and getting through my coffee. But I'm going to share with you a bunch of quotes from some very, very, very successful painters. Very successful painters. Famous painters whose work has echoed down the ages in some cases. And consider that they had, in many cases, the same doubts as many of you have when you start a project. So let me look a couple up. This is actually, we took this theme on a little while ago on our own Instagram actually, and we made a bunch of posts about this quite a long time ago. I'm going to revisit a lot of these. So if you want to sort of take a look at these and reconsider them, then you'll find them on our Instagram from, I don't know, about a year ago or so. Okay, so here's one that I really love. And I think what this one speaks to is just because we might have some self-doubt about what we're painting, it's not necessarily relevant to anybody else's experience of what you're doing. So from the great Edgar Degas, art is not what you see, but what you make others see. Okay, so we're always hypercritical of our own work, and we always tend to have this make us pull back from thinking about what could our next project be. So I'd like you to consider that quote and realize that this great artist also had these same doubts, but he still stepped forward and tried again. So take a step next time that's a little bit longer than what you normally would do. Try something that you didn't try before. Be adventurous. Be prepared to make something that you see as a mistake, because you know what? Others may see it as adventurous, and others may enjoy it much more than you. And the funny thing about art is, in my experience anyway, when I've created something that I maybe am not completely happy with, but I see other people enjoying it, that gives me great pleasure. So I think that's a great quote from him. Let's find another. Okay, so this one's kind of fun as well. So I'm just going to read it. It's from a gentleman called Scott Adams, and it says, "Creativity is allowing yourself to make mistakes." Creativity is allowing yourself to make mistakes. So in other words, be bold, okay? Creativity is allowing yourself to make mistakes. Art is knowing which ones to keep. Now, to me, what that implies is the creation of art does come with a bit of experience. So when we pick up our paintbrush, or when we pick up our airbrush, or our charcoal stick, or our pencil, or whatever, the one thing that's certain is that before we're done with whatever we're doing, we're definitely going to make some mistakes. Now, what's not quite so certain is perhaps when we make a mistake, it might be something that is a little bit better than what we were hoping for. Or we might see another application for it where we think, oh wow, that actually could be really useful somewhere else. The point is that you can't gather this information, you can't create this repository of techniques without picking the tool up and just being creative. Okay, so be creative first, and then as you get this repository of images and works that you've done and mistakes that you've made and effects that you've tried and color blends that you've attempted and recipes that you've put together, slowly you will start to discern what speaks to you. And when you start to discern what speaks to you, this is when you start to become capable of creating your art. So art, the creation of art is an accumulation of you applying your experience to all of your mistakes. But to make mistakes, you've got to be creative. So I think that's a wonderful quote. Creativity is allowing yourself to make mistakes. Art is knowing which ones to keep. Thank you, Scott Adams. And I'm going to follow that one right up with this from the absolutely imperiously, toweringly wonderful artist who is Miles Davis, jazz musician and painter of a magnitude that one could never imagine without actually seeing this individual exist. Do not fear mistakes, there are none. So my understanding of that is mistakes are, it's a question of context. So if you make a mistake with your paintbrush or your airbrush or whatever, it's perhaps only because what you did is in the wrong context for what you're trying to do. If it's something unexpected, particularly unexpected, it's always worth trying to, not get angry with yourself when you make this mistake, but just take a moment, a couple of breaths, and just analyze what happened. File it away in the back of your mind, because there is absolutely a context for which that mistake is entirely appropriate. So that's a really profound piece of advice from a truly great artist, expressing and acknowledging the fact that, mistakes happen, and then him saying that there are none. I think what he's saying is, when they're in the right setting, they're no longer a mistake, and therefore no mistake is a mistake. So I think that's quite a wonderful quote from Miles. Okay, so now we're getting really deep into this. I hope you're enjoying this as much as I'm enjoying making it for you. This is from Salvador Dali. Salvador Dali says, "A true artist is not one who is inspired, but one who inspires others." Is not one who is inspired. Okay, so what that says to me is all of us have our off days, have our bad days, have our days when we're not feeling so great. We all have those days. It sounds from this like Salvador Dali was not inspired every day that he created art. Well, that's entirely possible. I'm sure it was the case. And it's just kind of amazing to hear the admission from the great man himself. So on the days when you don't necessarily feel inspired, fear not, because it's entirely possible that something that you've done has inspired another on the same day that you're not feeling quite so inspired yourself. And as an average Joe, one of the ways that I find I can try to inspire others is, and I'd really encourage all of you to take this up as well, because it's so pleasurable to do this, is when you see a friend of yours and you can see that perhaps he lacks a piece of knowledge that perhaps you have, that might help him to unlock another creative avenue. Take the time and make sure that you pass that information on to him. He'll probably respond and give you something back too. And the great thing about this is, of course, is exactly what Salvador Dali says here, is we can all be great artists if we engender inspiration in others. And one of the easiest ways to do that is when you believe that you've got a bit of knowledge that you've picked up that somebody else could do with, and you see that they need it, take the time and pass it on, and almost certainly you'll inspire them. And as I always say, when we do this, the rewards go both ways, but probably the reward is greater for the person who helped the other. So I think this is a great quote. A true artist is not one who is inspired, but one who inspires others. This is one of the things about what we do at Harder and Steenbeck that I love so much, is that I feel that part of our purpose is when we really dedicate ourselves to try to make sure that we make the best possible tool that we can give to artists, we hope what we're doing for them is we're giving them something that enables them to realize their vision that only they can see in the absolute highest possible definition, the highest possible fidelity to what they've seen, and put it out there so that all the rest of us can enjoy this vision as well. And I think that sits really quite nicely inside of this quote. And that's one of our big reasons as to how we find meaning in our work as people who, go to work every day to make airbrushes. So I really like that one. Hope you do too. Okay, this one I absolutely love. This is from Pablo Picasso. And there's such a rich amount of quotes available from Pablo Picasso. But this is, I think, one of the ones that can speak to all of us, really. And he said, once upon a time, he said that everything you can imagine is real. And so what I draw from that is that, and I think this is one of the wonderful things about art, is that, you know, what we're surrounded in the world is we're surrounded by what has already been done. So everything that we open our eyes and see, we're seeing what has already been done. And sometimes, you know, if we don't have exciting things happening every day in our lives, sometimes when we see too many of the same things every day, we're in danger that this wonderful gift of life that we all have is in danger of being wasted by us allowing it to be boring. Should never allow that to happen. Art gives a way out of that, no matter where you are, what you're doing, what your limitations are, where you live. It gives you a way out of that, because everything that you can imagine can be real. So if you can imagine something, this is now something that only you can see. This kind of goes a little bit back to what I was saying in the last little segment. It's something that only you can see, but all it takes is for you to paint it, or you to bring it into creation. And now it becomes real, and it becomes something that can change somebody else's day and change somebody else's trajectory by seeing this thing that you imagined into reality. And that's just a profoundly powerful thing that we can all do, and sits really at the root of, I think, why creativity is so important, is because imagination can change our reality. We can really use it to change our reality. So, you know, I think that it comes back again to the first one that we said, where Van Gogh said, you know, if you hear that inner voice that tells you you are not a painter, then by all means paint, and that voice will be silenced. And I think this goes together really rather nicely with this one from Picasso, because what it tells us is, you know, in the moments when we feel the most self-doubt, or in the moments when perhaps we're surrounded by the most amount of drudgery, probably one of the best things we can do is just to imagine something other, and then become a painter by painting. And then we create something that can be then shared with others. And obviously, the gift of art is always a wonderful thing to give. So I really like that one too. I hope you also do. Okay, this is really cool. This is from Simon Sinek, who, if I remember rightly, I think he's an author. Anyway, wonderful quote. Don't give to get. Give to inspire others to give. And I really love that. And I think that as we apply it to, you know, what we're sharing together, you know, we're all trying to paint things, we're all trying to create things. I think what it says to me is, I love the idea that, for example, the reason why I like to make these videos is because I feel like I've got some bits and pieces of knowledge from all my years with the airbrush, which I really would like to share with all of you, in the hope that it helps all of you to enjoy your creativity more. And my sincere hope is that if you pick anything up from something I'm saying, and it's helpful to you, that this will inspire you to pass that on to somebody else, that they can also enjoy their creativity in a more seamless and unfettered way. So yeah, I think this is a really, really great quote, and it's really dear to my heart, because it's really the way that I see the way that each one of us can influence the world in our own little way. And if we all make our tiny little corner that much better and more enjoyable for the people around us, then how can we fail to make everything around us better? Okay, I've got two more that I found here, which they're both quite abstract and not specifically to do with painting, but I'm going to give you these two now anyway, and then I'm going to move on from this topic, because I'm concerned that I'm coming over a little bit too heavy for a painting video. But let's have a look at these. This one I think is really quite wonderful, and I'm obviously saying it in the context of, you know, whatever knowledge you have about your painting, you know, always be ready to share it with somebody who you believe might need it. So this one is from an unknown person, and it says, "The point is not to pay back kindness, but to pass it on." And I love that, because of course, you know, if somebody does something kind to you, then of course it's great to think about doing something kind to them. But when you think about perhaps what was their motivation for doing that to you, it was to help another. And so probably the best outcome for that person who is kind to you as a result of their kindness is that that kindness finds its way to yet another person again. So I rather love that one. I think that's quite special. And it goes hand in hand with this next one, which is from Gandhi. And I'm sure that many of you know this one. And he said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." And I think nothing more needs to be said about that. We can, we can probably live that one every day of our lives, and everything will be better if we did. Okay, so moving firmly back into the realm of painting, here's the wonderful quote from Edward Hopper, who said, "If I could say it in words, there would be no reason to paint." And I really like this one because what it says to me anyway is there are certain things that we do struggle to communicate with language. And of course, language is inherently limited because, many of us speak different languages, and so we can't communicate well with one another if our mother tongue is not the same. And this is one of the wonderful things about art. Two things about that. One is that when we communicate visually, it is quite, or musically, or with movement, it is kind of a universally understood human language. And the other thing about it that's rather marvelous is that when you create something which has a certain message or feeling in mind, then often when another person looks at it, they get something out of that that wasn't exactly what you intended, but is perhaps more profound to them. They saw something else within what you created. And it just comes back around to, the fact that when you create things, when you try to create art, when you kind of put yourself out there and have a go, there's so much more that you might be doing for somebody else that you may not even be aware of. So I really like that. I think that's a great quote as well. Okay, here's an interesting one. So it's almost like it sits between physics and art, and I do think that there are some strings which attach the two together. This is from Emil Nolde, and he said, "There cannot be creation without a lot of energy." And so this is really interesting as well, because in today's world, there's a lot of talk about mental health and things like this, and not necessarily so many answers about what we ought to do about that. And I do tend to think that, anything that's happening inside of our minds is a representation of energy. So, for example, if we're having a lot of negative thoughts, or we're feeling bad about our life or ourselves or whatever, just to engage in that kind of internal conversation is consuming quite a lot of energy. Create something else with that energy, I guess, is what I see from this. So, if you are, and again, it comes back to that wonderful Van Gogh quote that we talked about at the start, where, if that inner voice tells you that you are not a painter, then by all means paint, and that voice will be silenced. And when you put those two together, what it says to me is, if you find yourself with a lot of negative energy in your life, understand that the blessing is that you have a lot of energy. Take that energy and by all means paint, and then you will become a painter. And then I think there's all these other things that we've talked about throughout this video where, you create something that means something to you and it speaks to somebody else in a completely different way that's so valuable to them. Then you're suddenly at the center of all of these possibilities of creation that can do so much good in the world around you. And you can't fail to be inspired and lifted up by this use of that energy. So I really like that quote in the way that I understand it that way. So hopefully that speaks to some of you as well. Okay, and then I've got one more for you before we have some closing thoughts on this, and that's from Claude Monet, who said that color is my day-long obsession, joy, and torment. And I think that any one of us who has taken on a project where we're working with color and we're trying to create something or paint something, completely understand this. This kind of balance of these three things, the kind of obsession of what we're thinking, and then the joy of seeing it begin to take shape, and then the torment of trying to know when is it good enough that we can release this thing and let it go. And so that's a fun balance, and full of energy too, full of energy too. So I think that's a great message that, you know, you look at all of these statements and they just echo over decades and centuries of artists. And we understand that so many of the things that you might be experiencing in your studio at home were also things that have been experienced by some of the greatest artistic talents that this world has ever seen. So it's great to know that you're in good company. It's great to know that the same doubts that might be afflicting you on your latest project also afflicted people like Miles Davis and Claude Monet and Degas and, you know, all of these wonderful artists that we can enjoy the works of today. You are sharing that common ground with all of them. And the message is to take that next step forward, because it might lead you into an area where you inspire another, where you create something that gives a gift to somebody else that you couldn't imagine it would. And all of these things, I think, are great reasons to pick up the pencil or pick up the paintbrush or pick up the airbrush, or, you know, to take a few extra minutes with your buddy who's having a struggle with some aspect of his creative process, if you have the knowledge to help him move through that. And I think this is the thing that, you know, more than anything else, what I'd love to really try to encourage everybody to do as a result of this channel is, you know, if you found anything that we've given you on our channel helpful, then please take it to your buddy. Take it to the guy who seems to be struggling a little bit. Take it to someone who seems to be struggling to find a little bit of meaning in their day-to-day. Let them try something new. I think this is really valuable, and it's a great way that we can spend our time to share this gift that we've all discovered of creativity. And the more people that we can share it with, the better. And there's so many ways to do that. You know, in one of our other videos, we talked about a bit of upcycling of things. And any one of you, regardless of what kind of painting you're doing with your airbrush, the really cool thing is that the airbrush, coupled with water-based acrylic paints, you can paint on almost any surface imaginable. All you got to do is scuff it off a little bit, give it a wipe over with some alcohol or something like that so that you get the grease off, and you can paint on almost anything. And this is really fun because, you know, you can pick up bits of nothing and apply color to them, turn them into something wonderful that can be a gift that you give to a friend or a family member for no reason other than that today is today. And this is another thing that you can use your creativity for. Who doesn't love to get a gift? How joyful could you make someone else's day by painting something for them, even if it's something so simple like a little pebble that you picked up outside and you just painted it a beautiful color and put a nice color fade around the edges of it, and it's something that can sit on somebody's dresser and make them remember that you took the time to do that for them. So all of these things are accessible to us and possible for us to do and possible for us to share, and these are all ways that we can impact the world around us and start to spread more of what we all need more of, which is, you know, a sense of community, caring, and being good to one another. So I hope this video has been enjoyable for all of you. I'm really fascinated to see how many of you made it to the end. I imagine not so many. So if you did, then please write in the comments, I made it, just so that I can understand how many of you were interested in this sort of format, because I'm in a very privileged position here in the sense that I speak to many people every week, fantastic painters who, you know, have these kinds of experiences and have given me this kind of information to share with you. And I wonder if it wouldn't be a fun thing to make a few more videos where we sit down and we talk about the impact of our art and our creativity and how we like to see that manifesting in the world and how we could better deploy it to each other. And so if you find this format interesting, then we'll do what we can to make a bit more of it and have some more conversations with other people with more to say on this topic than just me. So hope you've enjoyed it. Have a wonderful rest of your day today, and maybe paint something for somebody that you didn't think you'd paint today. Take it easy, and thanks for watching.